There's a lot of information out there on you.
I said it in year one, and it's a statement that I'll live by. The Michael Jordan of 200s in terms of overall resume.
I saw Mike Mcknight.
Yeah.
Which is the most renowned 200-mile runner that is today. He's won them all.
This guy is running further and faster than anyone else, and his name is Mike Mcknight.
This is my man, Mike Mcknight, and first and foremost, the name does it for me, Mike Mcknight.
One of the most humble guests I've ever had on the show. It's an honor to have Mike with us.
Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Michael Mcknight.
I'm sure you're all familiar with the amazing Mike Mcknight.
Today's guest is a return guest, Mike Mcknight.
Mike Mcknight.
Mike Mcknight.
Mike Mcknight.
Mike Mcknight.
Mike Mcknight.
You are widely considered the best in the 200s. And if you Google Mike's name, you're going to see such headlines as...
Turning now to a Utah runner who's making big strides, coming in first place at an ultra marathon. We're talking 250 miles long.
Yeah, there was a big climb up to Camp Kippa, and that's where I saw Mike Mcknight. Mike was kind of bundled up on a couch, but man, this dude looked done. I mean, I thought he was toast. I said, I think Mike Mcknight's out of the race, man.
Rising from the ashes like a phoenix, coming back from the depths of despair. Michael Mcknight, your 2023 Cocodona 250 champion, ladies and gentlemen. 69 hours, 41 minutes. What an incredible performance. The most incredible comeback in ultra running.
You can be Googled now, right, Mike? Because I know you're the reason I have you on the show is because you're an unsung hero. If she Googles Michael Mcknight, do you come up first?
I couldn't tell you.
You see, that's your problem.
Recently, he's run 100 miles on 0 calories. So I have to think about that and say it again, 100 miles on 0 calories.
Maybe some of you are 10-mile runners. Well, how about 100 miles? Well, that's what Mike Mcknight did. But the kicker is you did it on 0 calories.
I want to get more within the mental state because I have to assume that in terms of human beings on the planet, you're in the top 0.001% in terms of grinding and getting things done.
I wanted to try a backflip off of a ski jump. I was getting ready to hit the ski jump. This jump's way too big. I'm going way too fast. And so I panicked. I fell over as I was launching off from the jump. Both my feet are up in the air, came down and landed right on my back. And I instantly knew something was wrong with my back. I shattered, it was my L1 vertebrae. I don't know how in depth you want me to go. It's kind of a graphic story, but I had a friend where I lived growing up that his older brother was abusing the entire family. My friend, his sisters, and I got introduced to that. I saw some things that no kid should ever see from a sexual standpoint. Got introduced to porn through him, and the brother threatened me with a gun. It was quite a bit of trauma. I was probably 8 or 9.
When your time is coming to an end, your head hits the pillow for the last time, and then you're reflecting back on your life. What are some of the goals that you hope to achieve?
Man, it's a deep question. Oh, wow. That's a hard one. I mean, for me, it's just...
So with Killian now being a father, talking about the relationship you had with your father, I'm a dad of 4 boys, and there's like things that we have and share together that just give me this immense pride.
Yeah, you're making me tear up a little bit because I miss them right now.
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast. Well, welcome to the Patina'd Podcast. Today I have Mike Mcknight, a legend on the show. I know that's going to make you uncomfortable, but you're all about discomfort, Mike. You've done a ton of podcasts. You know, there's a lot of information out there on you, and it's easy to find. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to skip through some of that, through some of the running accomplishments and things like that, though we might kind of touch on some of it. But I'm going to bullet point this intro for you, Mike. So Mike is well known amongst the ultra community as the GOAT of the 200s. And I know that's going to make you feel uncomfortable because you've mentioned that before. You don't like that term, but you're mentioned as, well, it's a short, when you say of all time, it's a short period of all time within the 200s, right? It hasn't been around for that long, but you are widely considered the best in the 200s. And, you know, if you Google Mike's name, you're going to see such headlines as ultra runner Mike Mcknight just ran 118 miles completely fasted. You'll see headlines that say Mike Mcknight wins ultra racing triple crown, the king of the 200-mile races. You'll see historic comeback at Cocodona 250, where you fell back all the way to 62nd place and ran all the way through. How many hours back was that, by the way? Was that like 9 hours back you were?
Yeah, my crew told me I was about 10 hours behind.
10 hours behind. So coming back from, I think that's probably a better way to think about it. Instead of thinking in 62nd place, think about this man came back from the dead from 10 hours behind to win Cocodona 250 last year. And that's widely regarded as the greatest historical comeback in ultra running. So you've had that as well. And I know you're in Arizona right now preparing for Cocodona that's coming up in a week, something like that. But yeah, you're doing
a little over a week.
You're doing some heat training right now, getting the body ready for it. The sauna isn't good enough for you. You're just going to go out and run in it to get the heat training because you're a professional. So fantastic. So I want to do something different within this interview, Mike. I don't want to spend a bunch of time just focusing on the accomplishments that everybody can Google and see. And that's not to disrespect your professional running career. What I want to get more within the mentality, the mental state, because I have to assume that in terms of human beings on the planet, you're in the top 0.001% in terms of mentality, keeping focused and grinding and getting things done. And the focus of this podcast is resilience. And so that's what I want to get into with you. Is that cool?
Definitely.
All right, man. And so if we can get into some of your origin story a little bit, being raised on a dairy farm and this sort of stuff, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I grew up on a 4 or so generational dairy farm, and me and my siblings all grew up on it. My sibling, I always call myself an accident. My parents deny that, but my closest sibling to me is 11 years older than me, so there's quite the gap. And so by the time I came along and started working on the farm, it was just me, one of my cousins, and my dad and my uncle. So had a lot of opportunity to work hard. I probably didn't work as hard as my cousin, though. I didn't like growing up on the dairy farm. You know, think of any kid that's 7 years old, the last thing they want to do is go feed calves and take care of crap like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I did it. I grew up on it, but I didn't appreciate it or like it at the time. But I also feel like that upbringing is kind of what turned me into an ultra runner. Like, you know, I'm sure if you've done your research, you've heard me say multiple times that I believe the dairy farm is what helps me operate well on sleep, like being in a sleep deprived state, which is something you have to be used to in a 200 for sure. And, you know, again, even though I didn't appreciate it at the time, now I do appreciate hard work. So I feel like that this is kind of what shaped me into being an ultra runner, which could be weird for people to think, a dairy farmer turning into an ultra runner, but I see the connections. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hard work and yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, like I'm not a dairy farmer, nor my wife would probably like us to get a cow here soon. And with the cost of raw milk, I've sent you some messages like on Instagram with the cost of raw milk in in California, it wouldn't be a terrible idea. But yeah, well, what we know about human beings is if they develop a mentality around hard work and being willing to do it, even though they don't want to do it necessarily, but being willing to do it and going out and doing it. I think maybe there's even something to doing it when you don't want to do it that builds up that resiliency. And so if you're doing that as a child, you're going out and you're milking the cows and you really don't want to do it, but you're doing it anyway, then there's a beginning part, right? And that does directly shape into ultra running. So yeah, I know as well, your dad had like a love for cars or classic cars and kind of restoring them. And how was that for you? Did you kind of get your hands dirty doing that with them, and how was that experience?
Yes and no. I didn't do it. So, I mean, the story behind that is my dad bought it was a 68 Camaro off of eBay when I was, it was 6th or 7th grade. And I mean, it was a sweet car. It was red, it had a white bumblebee stripe around the hood. And being a 6th grader, I was like, I want a car. And so my dad found this, like, it was a 68 Mustang on eBay, and he placed a bid on it just to make me happy. But it was such a low bid, he didn't think he would get it, and he ended up getting it. And so we ended up getting this 68 Mustang, and when it showed up, the interior was awful. Like, there's pictures of the interior, and we knew the interior was going to need work done on it. But the paint job, like, it had 2 pinstripes down the entire length of the car. And when we got there, we could see that the person who owned it before us used a can of spray paint to do it.
Gosh.
And so it was like the paint job was pretty shoddy, just as much as the interior almost. So we ended up restoring it, and I would say, like, from a percent, again, I'm in 6th grade, like, you know, I'm working on the farm, I have friends, like, you know, I told my dad I'd help him restore it, but, like, you know, I didn't do as much as I said I would. And so if I had to put it into percentages, I'd say I maybe helped at like 10%. My dad did the rest of it. I helped strip it. We had a sander, like, where we stripped the paint and got it down to the metal, and I helped do that and bits and pieces, but the rest was my dad. And now it's this beautiful, you know, it looks like Bumblebee from Transformers. It's yellow with 2 black stripes on it. The interior is all black. Like, it's a pretty sweet looking car now. And I do regret not helping him as much as I could have. I feel like that could have been a fun, unique experience, but you know, there's still some memories behind that car with him for sure.
Yeah. So speak about that relationship with your dad. It sounds like he definitely wanted to have things that he can not only instill into you, but just kind of have projects to be a part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure most people say this, like, I know not all people have a great relationship with their father, but you know, he's definitely my hero. You've seen me talk about, like, my faith. So just, like, you know, I got that from him. He's a man of faith. Like, he's 74 years old, and I've seen him swear 2 times, which is pretty crazy. One of them was on the farm, and if you grow up on a farm, you might have heard the phrase that it's not swear words, it's farm words. So I don't know if I can count that one, but, like, to grow up on a dairy farm and, like, only see him swear once on the dairy farm was pretty miraculous in my opinion. And then the other time we were, like, driving down the freeway, it was a blizzard in Wyoming, and we were driving. It was actually, he came to help me and my wife move back from Denver to Utah, and we were in a big truck that had a huge trailer with all of our crap in it. And between the wind and the snow drifts, all of a sudden the truck started going one way and the trailer started going the other way. And he like gripped on and, you know, said a little cuss word, but it's like just his example of, like, you know, never using foul language. And, like, I've never seen him raise his voice once to my mother. Every other day he was up at 2 a.m. So most dairy farmers are either milking their cows at 4 a.m. or 2 a.m. and then 4 p.m. or 2 p.m. And we chose 2 a.m. for whatever reason. I feel like that was the worst.
Just to make it
but
more painful.
Yeah, just seeing him get up every other day at 2 a.m. and come home and take an hour nap and then go move the pipe and go take care of the hay and stuff, come back, eat lunch, and then go do it all over again, day in and day out. And he was milking cows on Christmas. There's no days off for a dairy farmer. So just seeing all of that. And then he had callings in our church. He was high up in the church a couple times, and like, he would. So the way that our church works, like any kind of calling that you're given, like in a leadership position, it's volunteer based, and they extend the position, and you can deny the position if you don't want to do it. And I feel like he had every reason to deny it, but like he accepted it, and he would get up and, go milk cows 2 a.m. Sunday morning, and then come home and shower and get ready for church and take us all to church. And, his position, he would be sitting up front in front of everybody. And, I'm not going to lie, like most of the Sundays he was asleep up there. He tried his hardest, but you'd always see his head go down and come back up. Anyway, so yeah, like everything about him and even now being 74, he still works in the fields. He's still like, he can't just sit around and do nothing. So I definitely feel like a lot of who I am was passed on to me from just watching him.
I just wanted to take a quick pause and genuinely thank you for getting this far through the episode. This podcast is very small if you haven't noticed, so every like, every comment, every follow or subscribe, it really makes a difference. So my only request from you is to interact with the content if you like it. Like and follow, rate and review, and share if you feel like this is something that's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much. And what about your mother now? So you had mentioned he respected your mom in a way to where he didn't raise his voice at her and that sort of stuff. But now, how was she in terms of this instilling process and raising you?
I mean, she's the thing I love about my mother, and she's, I mean, it was a very like Little House on the Prairie style upbringing. I don't know if you ever watched that.
We still watch it on Amazon Prime. Me and my kids.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I love that show. But like, all the men were out just working in the fields, and then we'd come home for lunch and she'd have lunch ready for us. We would go out in the fields again, and they would have dinner ready for us. Or sorry, she would have dinner ready for. Sorry, this dog's distracting me. But like, yeah, I mean, she was always just taking care of us. And, I know in today's world that could be viewed as a very sexist type thing, but it was like, I would have very happily let her go work out in the fields and made dinner for everybody. That was what was her thing was. She wasn't out in the fields with us, but, and then just how caring she was. Like, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and the school that I would go to is about a 25-minute drive from my house. It was this central high school that took care of the neighboring suburban cities, but also all the farm land out to the west of it. And so I was in my group of friends, they all lived within like a mile to 4-mile radius of our school, but I was the one that was 20 miles away, kind of a thing. But as I got older and like started participating in sports and started hanging out with them, I'd be out till midnight and then drive home. And every single night, my mom was either awake on the couch, reading a book, waiting for me to get home to make sure I was okay, or she was asleep on the couch and, wanted me to wake her up when I got there so she'd know I was okay. 90% of the time, she had some dinner in like a pot in the oven, just keeping it warm for me. And then the next morning when I'd wake up to go to school, she'd be up making me breakfast. So it was like she took care of me a lot. And yeah, so
yeah,
I love my parents.
I think it's so interesting. I wanted to highlight that because I think it's so interesting. So you have these dynamics where I think the people that get the most shine within the world of resilience are the people with the horrifying upbringing, right? Like whether it's Tony Robbins or whether it's David Goggins, right? Like, and there's something to that because, it's a beautiful story. It's an amazing story to see somebody rise from the ashes and despite horrific upbringing, see them really make the most of life and squeeze every ounce out of it. And that's beautiful. And I'm very attracted to stories like that. But I'm also attracted to these stories like yours, where you're saying, like, I was raised in a very good home. And for me, being a therapist, if I have a teenage client, be like, oh no, like, make sure that kid gets on crack or something. That would be really good, so that they can have an overcoming story. I'm trying to work with the parents so that they can help integrate like healthy, secure attachment within the family system, right? Which sounds like that's how you were raised, because that would be the picture. You don't want your child, or you don't want the experience of the person to be horrific. You want it to be brought up in a healthy way, and in a way that also produces faith too, right? Like, for you to be able to have a faith in Christ and have that modeled to you from your parents, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I do want to point out too, real quick, like, in terms of like the whole rising from the ashes concept, like I had to do that through like injuries and a little bit of trauma that wasn't in the family setting, but more for just stuff that I was exposed to from some not so good friends when I was younger. So, you know, I do feel like I would agree with you. And I'm not saying somebody that has like the perfect upbringing can't be resilient, but I do think that, you know, if it's not in the home they have to learn to rise from the ashes, that it's probably somewhere else, whether through bad friendships or, you know, in my case,
Life,
injury,
right?
but yeah, from a parent sense, just life.
Yeah. And so I was gonna bring that up. That's gonna be my next thing, if we can touch on that. Now, I wasn't aware about the friendships part, so you can touch on that too. But I know there's a significant injury. I know that was something that you had to rise up from too. So yeah, any part of that you want to speak to?
I don't know how in depth you want me to go. It's kind of a graphic story, but growing up out in the middle of nowhere, and this was before I found, like, I feel like this trauma led me to the group of friends I have right now. And like the friends that I have right now, it's like, I don't know if this is common. People tell me it's not common. My wife tells me it's not common, at least from her experience, but it's like the group of friends that I ended up finding, who I'm still friends with today. It's like we're still best friends. We still meet up, like, and play Super Smash Brothers on the Nintendo. Like, we're still living in high school once a month or something like that, basically. So, you know, I do feel like what happened to me as a kid led me to this group of friends and really strengthened that bond. But long story short, I had a friend out in the middle, like where I lived growing up, that his older brother was sexually abusing the entire family, basically. My friend, his sisters, and I got introduced to that. Like, I saw some things that no kid should ever see from a sexual standpoint. And the brother threatened me with a gun to not tell anybody about it. So it was just, yeah, it was quite a bit of trauma. I was probably 8 or 9. It was pretty young. Got introduced to porn through him and stuff like that. So I eventually did end up telling my parents a couple of years later, had to go to therapy, and, you know, lost my only friend at the time, and went a few years without friendships, probably just because I had a jaded view of what a friend was after what I saw. So yeah, so that happened, and yeah, I guess that was your main question, right?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And how long do you feel like it took you to heal from that, or to feel trust towards other people?
I mean, it didn't take too long to feel trust towards other people. I mean, this group of friends that I found, it was very easy to see how good they were. I was actually introduced to them from like a girl that I had interest in that was friends with them. And like, she is like in terms of like a very faithful Christian 16-year-old, like she was she was up there, like it was very apparent like how good of a person she was. And then just me seeing that in her gave me the confidence to like trust all of her friends. In terms of how long it took me to heal from it, though, like, honestly, so I mean, I was like 12 or something. I was very open with my therapist at the time. I think I went to 2 or 3 sessions and just stopped because I was uncomfortable. But honestly, like, it was just over a year ago, I was talking a lot on social media about how I was having issues sleeping at night. Like I'd go to bed at 11 and wake up at 1 or 2 and I couldn't fall back asleep. And my friend is a therapist and he knew a little bit about my past and told me that there's a good chance that there's stuff that I still need to resolve. So I ended up going to therapy again last year. And so it wasn't until last year really that I finally was able to get through that and move on from it.
Yeah, good for you. That's something a lot of people won't do, is to go back to therapy to cover that thing that happened so many years ago, because they're like, well, I've gotten to the point to where I am right now. I've been able to bear through it. I'm fine. I don't really have to go there. So how is it for you therapeutically to be able to work through that, and what like, has it helped with your sleep, or what improvements have you seen as a result of therapy?
Yes, I mean, the biggest reason I started paying attention is because I know, like, my son, he's 7, my daughter, she's 4. So my son's reaching that age where I was I was introduced to it. And so I just started to notice that, like, things between my kids triggered me when, like, any parent who hasn't gone through what I went through, like, wouldn't be triggered by it. And so I started like, why has this triggered me? Why is this bothering me? Like, my wife would be like, why did that freak you out so much? And so, like, I was just like, I wonder, like, he's at that age when this started happening to me and I don't feel like I fully healed from it. So maybe it's like, I mean, I actually have a social work degree. I never did anything with it, but, like, I know that stuff like that can, like, trigger those things that your brain tries locking away. And so, yeah, I mean, I only had to go to 3 or 4 sessions, but we did some EMDR, and it just helped. Like, it felt like I just had this thing on my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. And, like, it took it off. I started sleeping better. I was less irritated with my kids. Just overall, it just helped me, like, loosen up a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and shout out to EMDR. I'm a brain spotting practitioner, which is like the cousin of EMDR. It was derived from EMDR. So, yeah, big fan of it. It's awesome. Okay, so we can even talk about physical injury, which would make, for a lot of people that are listening or watching, people that know you already know the story, but people that don't, you had a significant physical injury as well that happened, which is why it's so remarkable from an athletic standpoint where you are today. So do you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've had lots of injuries growing up. It's funny, my parents told me I was their, I don't want to say golden child, but like it took, like, I never broke a bone when I was younger. And I guess all my siblings had these crazy accidents at those ages. And so my parents were like, oh, you're our good kid. Like, you're not going to cause us a lot of stress or hospital bills and stuff. And as soon as I broke my first bone, like, it went downhill after that. But definitely the cherry on top was I was 21 in college. It was my first year in college. And long story short, I tried showing off to a girl at the ski resort. I wanted to try a backflip off of a ski jump. And as I was getting ready to hit the ski jump, I was like, wait, I don't know. I've never done this. And this jump's way too big. I'm going way too fast. And so I panicked and I, like, tried falling over to not launch off of the jump. And what happened was I fell over as I was launching off from the jump. And so I go off in the jump, both my feet are up in the air. And this day, it was like kind of like spring skiing conditions. Like, there wasn't any powder, it was ice. And, I launched up in the air, came down and landed right on my back. My skis ejected off my boots. And I instantly knew something was wrong with my back. In retrospect, this is a dumb idea, but, like, my panicky 21-year-old self, I, like, got up and started crawling around just to make sure I wasn't paralyzed, because I instantly thought I broke my back. And then as soon as I could see I moved, I just kind of laid down, started screaming. My friends went down and got the ski patrol. They took me down, rode in the ambulance to the hospital, and got an x-ray and found out that I shattered. It was my L1 vertebrae. And then the next day I went, and real quick, the funny thing was, so my mom was actually just telling me this. My mom had a scare a few weeks ago and had to go to the hospital, and I met her there, and she was like, the last time we were in a hospital room together was when I had to show up for your broken back. But she told me that she was like babysitting my nephew, and she got a call from the ski resort, and all they said was, your son was in an accident, he's going to the hospital, and they didn't say anything else. And so my mom was like sitting there because like my sister was a nurse, and so she was working weird hours, and her husband had a graveyard, so he was sleeping. So she was at home watching their kid, and she remembered she was thinking, she's like, okay, Mike's always getting hurt. Like, how serious is this? Do I actually need to go to the hospital or not? But she ended up like deciding she better go. She woke up my brother-in-law and said Mike was in an accident. And so yeah, she showed up, and as soon as she saw me getting pushed in on the bed, the movable bed or whatever it is, she could tell something was wrong. But so yeah, I got surgery the next day. They put in 2 rods and 9 screws. They took out part of my hip bone and fused it to my spine. And then, to make a very, very long story short, I was told to wait about 6 months before I maybe try swimming, something very, very low to minimal impact. I was told to walk every day for my physical therapy. Like, I had a walker. They told me to walk every day, and they told me it'd be about a year again before I could start running. And I ended up just making a bunch of small goals. Again, long story short, and I mean, by about 3.5, 4 weeks after my surgery, I actually started running again, just because the first day I walked a mile. The second day I tried walking a mile a little bit faster. Then I walked 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles. And I kept pushing myself to see what I could do without making the pain worse. And so all these things weren't making the pain worse. So I was just like, you know what? And again, this could have ended up poorly, but I was like, I'm going to try running for half a mile just to see what happens. And, again, it didn't hurt more than my 1 mile walk. And so I just started running. And by that 6-month mark that I was supposed to consider swimming again, I was running 10 or so miles a day and was totally fine. So it was a miraculously quick healing process for the type of injury that it was.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you were already running prior to the injury, and is that something you were doing, picking up as a sport prior to the injury?
Yep. So my sister was doing a half marathon, and she was like, you should try it with me. And I was like, okay. And then I tried it with her. I fell in love with it. That half marathon was about 4 to 5 months before I broke my back. So yeah, I was just really getting into it for a few months before that happened.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder, I don't know. I have no clue. I'm not a medical guy. I've heard this with other especially endurance athletes, where injuries heal faster for them. And whether it be like a shoulder surgery or something bad, like the injury just heals faster for them for whatever reason. And I wonder if there's like a preconditioning there that might help the speed of healing. I don't know.
I mean, I can't prove it, and some people give me crap for it, but my theory is at the time I was drinking by myself 5 gallons of raw milk a week. And so I think it was that.
Yeah.
But you can't prove that, and that's probably silly to say, but whatever.
At 21, I was drinking 5 gallons of something other than raw milk a week pretty easily. And so good for you, dude. Good for you. Yeah, man. Yeah, and I know you speak, we're not going to go into detail on your other theories as to raw milk and the athletic potentials that it might have for you because of the sake of time. But yeah, I've never tried raw milk prior to following you. And then, relatively recently, you've started talking about the benefits of raw milk. And so I tried it. And it's an arm and a leg to purchase over here in California. But yeah, it is, whether it's helps athletically or not, it's so ridiculously delicious. Like the comparison, my first cup, I looked at my wife, I'm like, I've been missing out on this my whole freaking life. And I had her taste the difference. I'm like, try the difference. Are you kidding me? She, she wasn't as impressed as me, but I felt like I just stumbled upon this big secret that I never knew my whole life. So yeah, it's absolutely delicious.
I don't know what it is.
Well, Which is funny. It
Sorry.
makes me think of after a long run when I see you doing it, and even like Ben Light, you guys had that fun video of you guys in slow motion drowning yourself in it. But it makes me think of the Anchorman scene where Will Ferrell's drinking the milk. He's like, "Oh, this was a bad choice." Yeah, but okay. So let's get into family. So I reached out to a friend of yours, and I had this whole plethora of questions I was going to ask you regarding to your athletic achievements. And I reached out because I reached out to a couple people actually, and one person replied, and I wanted some insight into you as a man beyond what we get in the normal podcast and just character in general. And he gave me some great insights. So first, what I wanted to do was then ask about your wife, Sarah. So this individual that I reached out to said something to the effect of, she's an incredible woman. And this was the example that he gave. You guys have Killian, and he's 4 months old, and Sarah crews you onto victory of your first Triple Crown out of a Camry. Tell me about this story.
Yeah, so Sarah and I, we had Killian pretty quickly after we got married, and so we were still poor. I could say we're still poor. I just barely graduated college with my social work degree. While I was getting my degree, I was doing free internships and working a part-time job that didn't pay that well. So things were not that great. And so we had a Camry and we had a RAV4. And I don't want to say encouraged. I basically said, hey, we're going to take the Camry because it's cheaper in gas versus the RAV4. Obviously, that was a very selfish comment, but that's what we ended up doing. We didn't do it for all of the Triple Crown. We did it for Bigfoot for sure. I don't remember if we did it for Tahoe or not, but at Moab, we did end up taking the RAV4. And that might have been because Moab was a lot closer than the other races, since I live in Utah. But anyway, so yeah, Bigfoot, for anyone that's done Bigfoot, and now that I've crewed it, I've ran it 3 times and I've crewed it once. And now that I've crewed it, I was like, holy cow, I can't believe Sarah did this in a Camry, because Bigfoot, some of the aid stations you have to drive to, those roads are terrible. It's a miracle she didn't pop a tire, she didn't get stuck. Yeah, she rocked it in that Camry. But just to give you a perspective, I came into an aid station, and usually she was out waiting to greet me, but she wasn't. And so I was like, where are they? And so I started walking around the parking lot, and I found the Camry. And so I walked up to the Camry, and I peeked in the window, and I could see her curled up in a ball, in the front chair, the front seat of the Camry. And then down on the floor, under the steering wheel, next to the gas pedals, was a bunch of blankets, and there was our son sleeping on the floor. And so that was how she was sleeping for, that Bigfoot took me 72 hours roughly. So 3 days, her and my son, my 4-month-old son, were just chilling in the front seat and on the floor of a Camry sleeping. And she was still nursing him. She had to wake up and nurse him. She was taking care of me. So her commitment to crewing me is truly remarkable. And it reminds me of, a lot of my mother, just how much she was willing to stay up late to help the men that were out working in the fields and stuff. She knew I was passionate about it, and she knew that I needed help. And so she sacrificed comfort and sleep to take care of me at those races.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, just that scene of her doing that. And for people that aren't aware of what the Triple Crown is, these are 3 200 plus, very short period of time. I think 4 months or something like that, right?
It's more like 2 months, 3 months. Well,
is that right? 2 months?
At the time it was, but now Tahoe's been moved from September till June, so it's a little wider right now.
Okay. Yeah, that's incredible on her part. So with Killian now being a father, talking about the relationship you had with your father, what are some of the things that help give you that? And I'm a dad of 4 boys, and there's like things that we have and share together that just give me this immense pride.
Yeah, you're making me tear up a little bit because I miss them right now. I mean, yeah, I obviously don't have a dairy farm to raise my son on, right? Oh, when I say that, so my dad did end up selling the cows. My dad and my uncle did. I mean, they still do the crops and stuff. And my uncle just had actually a pretty massive heart attack where he died actually for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then they brought him back. But he's well. He's just, there's a good chance he's not going to be out in the fields with my dad this summer. So there's a good chance that I'm going to be going out there to help him as often as I can when I'm not at races. But so yeah, there might be a shot that Killian can see some hard work on the farm, but since I don't have that to give to him, like, my way of showing him hard work is through physical activity, right? I'm up every morning before he's awake, and my daughter, we have a daughter who's 4, but I'm up before they're awake running. I usually come back while they're eating breakfast, and there's lots of times Killian's just like, why are you running today? Like, I don't want you to run today. And I'm just like, why does it affect you? You're sleeping while I'm running. He's like, I just don't want you to. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, bud. This is something that I do every day. And, he sees me out back. He knows that so every night before we go to bed, we ask each other, all of us in the family, what our favorite parts of the day was, and if we had a least favorite part of the day. And more often than not, my favorite part of the day is either my run or my workout at the gym. And so they know that that's high on my priority list. One of my workouts I do out on our back patio. It's every Sunday morning. I go out back and exercise in the sunlight. And we bought Killian and Oakley little dumbbells, and they're starting to join me for it. In fact, just last week or a week ago, I made a reel about it, but Killian came home from school and he was like, I want to go running with you. And so we slapped on his Solomon shoes and we went for a 2.5 mile trail run with about 500 feet of climbing, or maybe it was more like 400. But I mean, there were some steep spots, and like the average pace was 12-minute mile. And so, he crushed his first trail run. So it's just fun seeing his transition from like, why are you running every day? Why are you doing this? To asking to join me, to come in and join me out on the patio. And so, I mean, yeah, even though, like I said, I don't have dairy farm ethics to pass on to my son, I am hoping to do it through just working hard through physical activity. And I'm trying my best to replicate. I mean, I asked my wife about this actually last week, and she said I'm doing great at it. But I was like, am I, a big part of who my dad was and what he taught me was not to ever raise your voice to your partner. And so I asked her if I was doing okay with that, and she said, yeah. So I am also trying to pass that on to my kids to respect your partner.
So that's a terrifying thing. And I ask my wife this periodically. I say, how am I doing as a spouse? And you say that because you put yourself almost like you feel like you're hanging on the edge of a cliff when you ask that, because you're now accountable for what you know and what she's going to say. And now you might need to make some changes. And so, yeah, that's a helpful tip for just like husbands and wives to maybe check in with each other with that, how am I doing in this area? And am I modeling, like for you saying, am I modeling this particular attribute that my father had? Am I modeling that to my son? So good for you.
Well, and with your kids, like going back to the whole, what's your favorite part of the day? Like,
yeah,
we used to ask, did you have a good day? Yep. And then silence. But like the whole, what's your favorite part of the day? Like, engages a lot more conversation. So ever since I don't know if you've heard of Larry Hagner, the Dad Podcast or the Dad Edge or something like that, but that's a trick that I learned from him, just changing that question from how was your day to what was your favorite part of the day. And then, yeah, it makes for some good conversations.
Yeah, we have a variation of that where there's that. And then I'll also ask, like, what was the most challenging part of your day, or how did you fail today? And then that can kind of spur up some stuff too. But yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So let's talk about Oakley. Same question. When you're seeing her and you're seeing her, look up to her brother, look up to you, look up to her mom, and try to model, because she's at this place where she's super plastic. She's just like absorbing everything and wanting to shape and mold herself according to what she's saying.
I'd say it's the exact same thing, like with Killian. Like she does the workouts with us. And when I say with me, like Sarah works out with me, so she joins all of us. Last summer, we took our kids to something called Run Club. That's something me and my wife helped out with, where basically kids from ages 1 to 15 can show up to, we had a third of a mile course around a park, and we keep track of their miles. You'd come Monday through Friday, run 30 minutes, and you could get prizes throughout the summer if you hit certain milestones. And, Killian averaged 2 miles a day when he did that. And our little girl at the time, she was only 3. Yeah, because she just turned 4, and she was averaging a mile a day. And so, like, she's, following right along as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then we just try to teach them to respect each other. Like whenever they do something wrong, make them apologize to each other. And, just, yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I don't love her as much as Killian. It's just the same thing. It's like teaching her to appreciate workouts, moving your body. Like when me and Sarah go to the gym and work out together, our gym has like a kids club that has a rock climbing wall and a bunch of cool stuff. So our little 4-year-old goes and rock climbs. And so, yeah, just giving them a love for moving around and not just watching TV all day and stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so like I said, I had reached out to somebody. That was Ben Light. And he was the one person nice enough to respond back and give me some insights on you. A quote that he had shared with me, or I'm just quoting with you a personal message that he shared with me. So I hope he doesn't mind me doing this. But it says, I personally have never seen a more powerful minded person than Mike. When his body is physically trashed, he just gets back up and keeps going far beyond most. So that was Ben.
Oh, what a good guy.
Yeah. And so with that in closure, this was my closing sort of question. It was like something like, when your time is coming to an end, your head hits the pillow for the last time, and you're going through that last portion of inhales and exhales. And then you're reflecting back on your life and the accomplishments of your life. What are some of the goals that you hope to achieve? And what are some of the things that you're going to be most proud of?
Man, it's a deep question. Oh, wow. That's a hard one. I mean, for me, it's just, I don't know if there's one answer for that. I mean, one, I just want to make sure that I didn't waste any time. Well, I don't want to say that. Everybody wastes time. I want to be able to get into that scenario and think, okay, this is probably a cheesy common answer, but like I want to make sure that just like the country song Tim McGraw wrote, like live like you're dying, right? Live life like you're dying. Like I just want to make sure I did it all, like that I didn't like conform to what everybody thinks I should do, that I lived my own life, that I, like you said, I ran 100 miles without eating any calories, and not everybody, but most people called me stupid. Most people beforehand said it wasn't possible. Most people said I was going to ruin my health and stuff, but I had the confidence that I was going to be able to do it and be just fine. And then just like breaking my back, like I was told to take a year off from running. And just only a couple weeks into it, I was like, I don't think I need to take a whole year off. I'm going to try it now. And so like living my life on my terms and doing, like having to say that I had the confidence to just do what I felt was appropriate is one thing that I want to be able to look back and reflect on and say that I did wholeheartedly. And then two, just, my family matters so much to me. And so, when I was just talking about my dad and my mom and everything that they taught me, and they're approaching that age where it's hard for me not to wonder how much more time I have with them. And so like, I want to be able to have the confidence that my kids can say those same things about me, that, they can list all these things that they saw that I did, that they learned from, that shape them into who they end up becoming, and hopefully instill on them. I mean, one, to respect their partners, like I told you, and then two, to just live life similarly to me, not in the sense of like having the same passions of me, having the same passions as me, and not like, you know, they don't necessarily have to love ultra running. I don't care. You know, just like my dad, like I don't love dairy farming, but I love the concept of it, which is hard work. And so I don't need my kids to love ultra running, but I want them to love the concept of moving your body, being passionate about something, not just sitting around and doing nothing with your life. Like I want them to be passionate and work hard. And so if I can like see that I taught them that and that they learned that and that they're their own unique selves, but still working hard. And then, yeah, looking back on my life and saying, I did everything I wanted to do. I did everything that I believed was right. Like if I can get to that point, then I'll die a happy man.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, Mike, I'm honored to have you on. It was a privilege to have you on the Patina'd Podcast. I'm going to be rooting for you coming up here in the next week or so. I'm excited to see if you can get into that repeat mode and do something amazing again at the Cocodona 250. So, yeah, Mike, really appreciate having you on, man, and thanks for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was A Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.